Welcome back, everybody. We're embarking on a longer series, and it's actually more of a book club vibe, right?
Yeah, more of a book club. So what we've been doing up until now has been sort of picking a topic and then doing a series of videos on that topic. What we've decided to do, which we're actually quite excited about, is to focus, to have a 52-part, or how many weeks are in a year?
Yeah, 52.
All right, a 52-part series, which will be working through this book, Called to Community. Some of you may be familiar with it. The subtitle is The Life Jesus Wants for His People, and it is by
Charles E. Moore.
Who's Charles Moore?
He's our resident theologian here at the Bruderhof.
Well, he's a member here at the Bruderhof. We both know him well and appreciate him a lot. And he has put together this book, which is a compilation of writings on the topic of community from a wide range of authors, everyone from Benedict of Nursia to Dietrich Bonhoeffer to Dorothy Day to John Perkins, the famous civil rights activist and friend of the Bruderhof. So there are 52 chapters.
That's right. And he's broken it down into 4 parts as well.
Into 4 parts. So the first part is A Call to Community. The second part is Forming Community. The third part is Life in Community. And the final part is Beyond the Community.
Yeah, and I think Charles really intended to encourage his readers to take a chapter at a time, get together with a group of friends over dinner or fellowship, and then have a conversation. So it's really just meant to spark or ignite a conversation on the topic of why are we called to community. I would also say one of the contributors is our founder, Eberhard Arnold, and he has some great teachings or kind of...
Right. So we'll be, I guess, conducting a mini discussion between the two of us. Mm-hmm. But what would be cool is if we could get a broader discussion in the comment section. So we're going to jump right in here with chapter 1. It's called The Great Idea. It's an extract from the book The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky. Have you read The Brothers Karamazov?
Absolutely.
When?
I would be too embarrassed to sit up here and say that I have.
When did you read it?
In high school.
Okay.
So it's actually time... Actually, reading this chapter inspired me to pick up The Brothers K.
Okay.
Again. Fantastic.
Yeah. It's a challenge. It's a challenging read, but worth doing every few years. So anyway, this section from The Brothers Karamazov is it's from the recollections of Father Zosima's youth. Now, Father Zosima was sort of the spiritual guide to the youngest of the 3 brothers, I believe, Alexei or Alyosha. And so Father Zosima is talking about his youth, and in this excerpt, he's talking about someone he used to speak to a lot, someone who used to come to him in his house, and they would have these amazing conversations. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick out some quotes that were meaningful or stood out to us. Doreen, you want to do the first one?
Yes, so here is the first quote that grabbed my attention. And that we are all responsible to all, for all, apart from our own sins. You are quite right in thinking that, and it is wonderful how you could comprehend it in all its significance at once. And in very truth, as soon as people understand that, the kingdom of heaven will be for them not a dream, but a living reality.
It's quite a vision. So the word here, in order for the kingdom of heaven to come about, is responsibility for others, taking responsibility. And that's something that, in the modern world, in today's world where individualism is prized so highly and self-actualization is sort of the goal, what we aim for. As we're growing up, how can I have an impact on the world? How can I be successful? This is talking about something quite different, responsibility for other people.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a constant debate in today's world and in the future, because what level of responsibility should we exhibit to our colleagues, the people we work with every day?
Our parents.
Yes,
as people, they get older.
Right, and also people in service industries that we pay to do tasks for us. There's always this dilemma: who is our neighbor? and how much do we go out of our way for them?
You know, I've been part of this Dante book club. It's like 15,000 people. It's an online reading club reading the Divine Comedy, and as we work through it, we're kind of like in the lower regions of hell at this point, of the Inferno. And what's interesting is Dante's view of hell is sort of the world collapsed in on yourself, where you can only really see things from your perspective. And so you have people in these tombs, you know, the people who have been condemned to hell in these tombs, and they're together, but they're unable to interact with one another.
It sounds like the age of isolation.
Yeah, the isolation that this talks about, eternal isolation. Luckily, it's just a poem. But you know, the other quote I was thinking about, which often gets batted around a bit, is from the play No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre, where he says, hell is other people. You heard that quote?
Wow. No, I'm actually not familiar.
Right. So I think a lot of people take that to mean like other people create hell for us, right? But it really wasn't what Sartre was going for. What he was going for is this notion that hell is when our personalities, our minds are constrained by other people's judgments of us.
Interesting.
But I don't think this is what Dostoevsky is talking about. I think he's talking about the forgetting of oneself for other people, out of service to other people.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more hopeful, and it's kind of the progress that each of us make when we are there to forgive and to see the best in people.
Let's go on to the next quote. Believe me, this dream, as you call it, will come to pass without doubt. It will come, but not now, for every process has its law. Okay, here we go. It's a spiritual, psychological process. To transform the world, to recreate it afresh, people must turn into another path psychologically. That's just what we were talking about. People have to go from this vision of the world as like, how can the world serve me, to how can I serve the people around me. So further, until you have become really, in actual fact, a brother to everyone, brotherhood will not come to pass. No sort of scientific teaching, no kind of common interest will ever teach people to share property and privileges with equal consideration for all.
Wow, that's a great quote.
Yeah, and again, like we see a lot of people who are drawn to this idea of community, right?
And that's what's so neat, is that there is no magic formula. It's not like we have like a set of rules or dictates or mandates that kind of shape what we know to be community. And that's why I resonate with what Dostoevsky writes about, what does he say? No sort of scientific teaching, no kind of common interest. And we've talked about that too. Common interest is not enough. It has to be something intangible.
An inward transformation. Yes. And I think that's often why many communities fail, is because they're based on, you know, an idealism that is not preceded by inward transformation, and people then rapidly come up against their own limitations in terms of what they can put up with, and you know, irritations with each other and disagreements can cause the end of the community. Let's do next quote.
What do you mean by isolation? I asked him. Why, the isolation that prevails everywhere, above all in our age. And how true is that for now? It is not fully developed. It has not reached its limit yet. For everyone strives to keep his individuality as apart as possible, wishes to secure the greatest possible fullness of life for himself. But meantime, all his efforts results not in attaining fullness of life, but self-destruction. For instead of self-realization, he ends by arriving at complete solitude. It goes right back to Dante's hell. Yeah,
and I mean, for me, like a particularly poignant example of this is all the people in nursing homes, right? So people who worked their whole lives and raised families and what have you. It's tragic then to see like what's the end result of that.
And I think that just boils down to just an unwillingness to embrace eternal values. And it's kind of hard to keep that in mind when you're in the bloom of life, or you're feeling good, you're active and enjoying all the generous bounties of life. But you have to keep that in mind, not in a sad way. But
it's true, like the responsibility actually does cost. It costs when you're young, right? You have to, you know, it's not the easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
It's to live for others, to give up your wants and desires out of love for others, or because you're focused on, as you say, the eternal values. You may not be able to do all the cool stuff you wanted to do. You might not be able to, you know, travel endlessly and whatever.
Yeah, and it also takes this like willingness to reject what the world is telling you is valuable, like your career and pursuing your passions. You know, that's not necessarily the end all be all, and that's not going to help you on your deathbed.
Right. All right. I think we have time for one more quote. This is kind of a pretty hopeful section, I find. So, everywhere in these days, people have in their mockery ceased to understand that the true security is to be found in social solidarity rather than in isolated individual effort. And here's the hopeful part. But this terrible individualism must inevitably have an end, and all will suddenly understand how unnaturally they are separated from one another. It will be the spirit of the time, and people will marvel that they have sat so long in darkness without seeing the light. And then the sign of the Son of Man will be seen in the heavens. And this is also cool for those of us who are living in community. But until then, we must keep the banner flying. Sometimes, even if he has to do it alone and his conduct seems to be crazy, a man must set an example and so draw people's souls out of their solitude and spur them to some act of brotherly love, that the great idea may not die. So this is an encouragement for any of you who want to experience more community in your lives. It's an encouragement to us. You know, sometimes it feels kind of weird to be the few people living this way, and you can sometimes even doubt yourself and say, is this really necessary? But
Yeah, it happens.
But it is important that there are places, that there are people who are living in social solidarity and keeping this great idea going.
Yes.
Okay, so that's all for this week's video. We'll be back next week to talk about Blessed Community by Rufus Jones.